Hi, everyone, and welcome to this panel. The wonderful group that you see in front of you are members of the Irreverent Media group. My name is Blake Chastain, and I'm host of the Exvangelical podcast. We are a new podcast collective, and each of our shows addresses religion and society from a variety of perspectives. My show is focused on individual stories of people who leave white evangelicalism. And before we get into the panel, I want everybody up here to talk a little bit about their shows and who they are, and introduce yourself. So take it away, Mason.
Great. Thank you for coming out. My name is Mason Menega, and I host a podcast called A People's Theology. And just an hour ago, I recorded an episode over there at the podcast tent. And I explore inspiring and liberating theologies that can transform the world in this podcast. So I interview lots of different theologians and church people and writers and poets and activists and all sorts of different kinds of people about the inspiring and liberating theology they're up to in the world. So that's what I do. You can follow me on social media at Mason Menega. And if you end up finding the other Mason Menega, he actually looks like he owns like a lizard. That's not the Mason Menega that I am.
The one you want to follow.
So if you stumble upon him, he's the worst of the Mason Menegas in the world. So don't give him a follow. Just give me a follow. Hi, Josie.
Hi, my name is Josie, Josephine Jael Jimenez for long. That's my professional name, but you can call me Josie. I am the co-host of the Speaking in Church podcast with my lovely friend Spencer Rose Taylor. We interview normal people. Literally anybody can sign up to be on this podcast. We like to highlight the fact that most of our deconstruction / church abuse stories are not unique. We're not alone. There's a lot of us out there. We talk shit. We obviously curse a lot. Well, I do. Spencer doesn't really. She's a lot nicer than I am. She's a lot cooler and sweeter. But we come from the perspective of my friend Spencer is, she calls herself a fat woman, so I'm saying that with reverence. And we're both, not straight people. I am Latinx. So, it's a fun little time. 2 women talking shit. That's it.
Which is also what our podcast is.
Ironically. 2 women talking shit. Hello, my name is Kevin Miguel Garcia. My pronouns are they, them, most of the time. Unless I look like a woman, in which case you know what to do. I don't know. Anyways, I have 2 podcasts. The first one is called A Tiny Revolution. I actually got the name from my friend Sarah Heath here. When we were at the beer tent at Wild Goose 6 years ago. So full circle moment for me. But A Tiny Revolution is a podcast about ordinary people living revolutionary lives. And doing it for 5 years, I have talked to all Christian pop culture, subculture heavy hitters. And then also just my friends who are psychologists in training or just obsessed with anime. It's literally everything in between, but I think the through line of it all is just, I believe that a return to wonder is the thing that is that's the revolution, is a return to this sense of being in wonder of who we are. So that's what I like to talk about. And on my other podcast with Sarah Heath, you might recognize us from our album artwork, which literally that's us doing it. But this is Rev Sarah Heath, and I'm going to let you tell your things about yourself.
Great, yeah. So the podcast that we do together is called Your Favorite Ants, because clearly we're your favorite ants, which is basically a podcast. We realized a long time ago that we had become the internet's ants. There were lots of questions people wouldn't want to ask their parents, but they would want to ask their slightly drunk aunt.
Yeah,
and so
or your slightly drunk pastor.
Right. So that is how we ended up creating Your Favorite Ants. It's a question and opinion. We'll give you opinions you didn't ask for. It's just sort of a commentary.
We also get into pop culture because I'm that girl, and so
And I am not that girl.
Yeah, we're talking about everything from the crisis in the Middle East to the fact that Bobby Burke now has abs, which is a blessing to.
And then Bobby Burke retweeted us.
What? I was like,
sorry.
He still doesn't follow me though, so fuck him. Anyways.
Which is literally what you want to do. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I mean. That's called shade. I don't have to tell you you're a slut because you know you're a slut, and that's called shade.
So
that's
it's
what happened
also
there.
educational.
Anyways.
And then the other podcast that I have on the network, as well, as Josie and I hosted the seasons 2 and 3 together, is called Making Spaces. It's a podcast about making space both literally and figuratively for people. A long time ago, I noticed that as we change the aesthetic of a space, we often change the makeup of the community within that space. So we like to talk to revolutionaries who are doing kind of interesting work within the design space, but also those who work with communities to change communities and are really making space for people. So those are the 2 podcasts, Your Favorite Ants and Making Spaces.
Hi, folks. I'm Robin Henderson Espinosa, and I get to co-host the Activist Theology Project with Reverend Anna Galladay. And we do, well, I kind of conned her into doing it when we were out in the woods one weekend doing a writing retreat.
It wasn't that kind of woods that kind of woods retreat. It was
for me.
Well.
Is this news? Are we making a statement? Anyways,
Oh my God,
we were in
they're
the woods
fighting.
together having a retreat of sorts.
Like, I'm normally not at a loss for words, ever.
But
And I
today
don't know
you
what to
are.
say.
Anyways, so I said, I have an idea. And she said, what's your idea? She's also a 7 on the Enneagram. So you know, they say yes to everything. And I said, let's start a
There's
podcast.
support group right over there.
They're still saying yes.
They're like, yes.
They don't know how to say no. I love it. So I said, let's start a podcast. And before she could think about what she was saying, she had already said yes. And a year and a half later, and how many episodes?
Almost 90. Today we're recording our 90th episode at the Wild Goose Festival.
Tell them more about what we do together. Don't tell them everything, though.
Well, you're the one spilling the tea.
Push it
Okay,
in
there
a
it
little
is.
harder.
I pushed it in harder. Yes. So yes, the Activist Theology Podcast. We have a commentary that encourage people to get their hands dirty in the work. It's important, I think, for many of us, especially those of us who come from a theological background or those of us who have been in the church setting or are academics from a theological perspective, to really understand where theology and justice and action merge together and actually coalesce. And so the Activist Theology Podcast is about getting your hands dirty in the work. We talk with theologians, we talk with mental health professionals, we talk with movers and shakers in the political and theological scene, and we really want to interrogate the landscape so that those that listen can find practical and real and interesting ways to actually move into their own communities and get their hands dirty in the work of justice and the work of liberation. We go by the motto that we aren't free until we're all free, and liberation and freedom are bound up with one another. Yeah. And the Activist Theology Podcast is really kind of a weekly conversation around how we do that and how we navigate social issues and the issues within our community to seek collective liberation.
That's great. Thank you, everybody, for talking a bit about your shows. Also, there are other members of the collective that aren't able to be here today. There's other shows like Straight White American Jesus that's done by Professors Brad Onishi and Dan Miller, as well as Dirty Rotten Church Kids, Go Home Bible, You're Drunk. Are there any other ones that I'm forgetting?
Your podcast.
My other podcast, Powers and Principalities, I have 2 also.
Yeah.
White Homework, yeah. So there's a wide swath of different content that is created by people that are a member of our collective. And that's actually where we'd like to continue the conversation, is talk about how storytelling is such an integral part of the type of work that we do in this public way of publishing podcasts. And I think this festival itself is really a testament for the need of that kind of content, and also just an admission of the impact that religion has in our society, in the way that white evangelicalism has had sort of a place of dominance for such a long time, but through the types of storytelling that people have been doing in the last few years, and that has been built on in the last 20 or 30 years by those who've gone before, that's why storytelling is so important. The other part is, the other reason why we're working together is to explore other ways to make our work sustainable, financially and otherwise. So I'm going to open it up to anybody that might want to chime in at this point and talk a little bit about that.
Well, I can just start talking about how I left academia to begin to tell stories. I found myself really frustrated that I would teach a class and expect people to read books and then just passively receive whatever I had to say. That for me, we've created an entire educational system based on passive learning.
Yes.
And after the 2016 election, y'all remember that election?
Oh, okay.
I packed up my Prius and drove cross country and landed in Nashville. I chose the regressive politics of Tennessee over my home state of Texas. I may have regrets about that now that the current governor we have is problematic, but I decided to leave my faculty post in Berkeley, Queer Utopia, for the South and to reclaim my roots because I felt like storytelling is a more active learning opportunity for people, and that when we tell each other, we're shaped by stories. And when we began telling the truest truths of ourselves, we begin to be reshaped in community and in relationship, which is why I launched my academic scholarship as a collaborative project. It's why I only do sessions here at Wild Goose in conversation, because there is something really powerful about story and the ways in which story shapes ourselves.
I think it's important, too, as we talk about we are in this place of great division, right? I don't know if you guys noticed. But there's a lot of division. And I think the only place where people don't just throw facts at each other is when we have an opportunity to both share our story and then receive a story. And unfortunately, within a lot of not just the evangelical, but also mainline Christianity, the idea of your story not mattering and the story of others not mattering, it's problematic when you think we come from a faith tradition, if you grew up within Christianity, that's all based on story, right? Jesus told stories. Like, people would ask him questions. Like, I always think about, like, going to lunch with Jesus would have been annoying because he'd be like, where do you want to go to lunch? He'd be like, once there was a man who had a, and I think we've lost the capability of really hearing other stories. And so the hope is that even if people say, that story is really foreign and bizarre to me, I think the more and more we can hear the story of other is when transformation really occurs in those relationships based on vulnerable storytelling.
I think the thing that interests me the most about creating podcasts, creating media for folks within the deconstruction movement, I really wouldn't even put it that way. I think we create things that we need for ourselves.
Yes.
Because I think that is ultimately what we are kind of doing here as a collective, is creating the thing we needed 10 years ago when podcasting was really taking off. And what's been really wonderful is to see, like, just here, I've got to meet some people who have listened to my podcast for a long time and said really, really kind words to me. And that to me shows that, this matters. That me talking with other people who have very, stories that are not going to make the cut on the news, or stories that aren't going to get viral attention on the internet. I think what has been transformative for me is recognizing that one good story really can help change a person's trajectory in their entire life. I had an 84-year-old woman come up to me at a conference to tell me that my conversation with Amber Cantorna, who is a queer writer, who's actually here at the festival, I believe, somewhere, unless she left. But that conversation helped her at 87 come out to her whole family. And I'm like, I'm a 27-year-old piece of shit. What do I know? Drag me. But it's one of these things where healing does not happen by accident. And it is my extreme belief that if we have this, we need to build. This is what we're doing. We are building a space for these stories to come in and for healing to take place. At least that's my ambition and that's my goal. And that's why I work with these people, because they have the same goal and ambition.
I think that we also recognize that it is hard to be in relationship with people that you don't feel as if you have anything in common with. And I am as guilty of that as anyone. But I also think that there's a capacity that podcasts have to open up little nuggets of the world to the views of those that listen, that they may never have ever even thought that they had to have a conversation with their partner, with their community, with their family, with their church community about. I mean, Robin and I have talked about everything from the Jewish-Palestinian conflict to, what's happening in the State House in Texas, to, women's rights, to the Enneagram, to conversations just with the two of us shooting the shit about how hard it is just to be in relationship with each other because we're so different. Sometimes just opening and cracking the door for others to hear our stories and the stories of those that we're able to showcase allows you to explore and dig in more to the things that are really important in the world. And I think just as your story, Kevin, tells about that 87-year-old grandmother, we have the capacity as humans, not just those of us on the stage who have podcasting equipment and stupidly get together and talk every week thinking that the world's going to listen to us, but you as humans who are doing goodness in the world have the capacity to simply change the trajectory of someone else's life by sharing a story or being in conversation with them about something that may crack a door for them that they never even knew was unlocked.
I think I want to share just from Josh and Adrian. Actually, Josie and I were speaking with Josh and Adrian, who are the Dirty Rotten Church kids, and we were talking about how it's not just story, but it's also humor. So what humor can do is it dismantles the thing that seems so painful and hard. If you can poke fun at it, you can begin to approach it. And so I think there's a fun way as well to engage story, because it's like, ha ha ha, why am I laughing? Because I've experienced it. And I think for both of them and also some of our funnier podcasts, it really is about, it's not about putting like, go home Bible, you're drunk. It's about going like, hey, this thing is weird, ha ha ha. Oh, all of us think it's weird. And so I think there's this shared story that even happens in humor and allows it to be approachable in a safer way, maybe than like, that's one thing I love about our podcast group is like, we have various levels of like, now I'm starting to sound like Amway. We have various ways that you can get involved. We're Mark, all of a sudden. I have some
multiple
oils.
levels,
yes,
and
yeah.
we might market through them.
And if you want to get that pink Corvette, what's the difference?
Yeah. I mean, yes, the humor aspect is very important to me. I think on the spectrum of our podcast, mine and Spencer's podcast would probably be the least theologically informed. And I mean, she's a lot more informed than I am, but we're more of a funny podcast. But the stories that we encounter, they have a certain rhythm to it when you get the church abuse coming in. But the uniqueness of other people also, I think, breaks down walls that, somebody, no offense, but all the famous people, you hear the same story over and over again. And it's like, oh my gosh, they feel so far apart from me. But when you get somebody who's just like your neighbor John, it's like, oh wow, so I'm not unique. This is not just me. The whole world is not against me. This is a systemic issue that needs to be addressed. And I mean, it's also like a variety of stories that you don't necessarily always have the chance to hear because of the secrecy behind it. Like, we recently interviewed this amazing person who left the Salvation Army, and I realized I didn't know anything about the Salvation Army. They have generals. I had no idea there was generals and lieutenants and whatever in the Salvation Army. Yeah. I think it's important to have all stories represented. And we're actively, I mean, I know you see a lot of white people on this.
Yeah.
But we do have more people of color, and we are actively seeking out new podcasts to join our collective that are of all.
Once again, it feels like we're doing the Amway, but I like it. Yeah, it's true, we are.
Right, and I think that's really valuable, and that is an intentional thing. Is that there are stories that you don't need one person to tell every story. You're not going to see representation from just one perspective, and that is what I think is really powerful. And that diversity of perspective and background is a strength, and it allows you to find a show that can speak to that authoritatively, and that is so much better than the sort of things that we may have had modeled for us in the past. And that reminds me of a conversation that Kevin and Sarah and I had on a show about we talked a little bit about how Kevin and Sarah, through both of their work, were in these positions where they were expected to meet multiple needs. And sometimes it's better for there to be a more specialized perspective.
Yeah, because especially I know a lot of shit, I really do, but I can't know everything, and I think the beauty of creating something like a collective allows us to find what we need, to find the person that we need, to find the conversation that we need. And do it in a way that is shame-free. Do it in a way where, because here's the deal, I don't call myself a Christian no more. I love Jesus, and I serve, and I lead worship at a trans, black, queer-led Baptist church. So riddle me that, right? But it's I think creating these things is it's now more than ever. But really, we are at a point in the shift of the Christian church, within the Christian faith, within American faith circles, within this community, whether we like it or not, we're here now. Within this community, there's a shift towards an expanded faith. And that's where I land. And what I love about being in this group is that Sarah is a Methodist ordained pastor. I figured out I was a witch in seminary. But I do not feel unwelcome. I feel completely at home with these people, and I think that is something that, it's rare. I feel the cool kids table finally just opened up, We
created the cool kids table.
Oh, yes.
I just want to say that when Anna sent me the email about y'all's launch, I immediately texted Sarah and Kevin, and I was like, hey, I just saw the launch about this. How do we get in on this? Because for me, the danger of a single narrative is what we've been battling in this country. And to join in with a collection of voices where you might get something from our podcast, you might get something from Sarah and Kevin's podcast, you might get a lot from Blake's podcast, and there you've got 3 podcasts.
That's just telling you the level of depth per podcast.
Oh my gosh, please, no.
You might hear a nugget.
I will melt here on stage.
Well, I guess my point is that between diversity is just a code word for tolerance. So I don't think that we are a diversity of voices, though we are very different in our approaches. But liberation on a collective scale requires a diversity of tactics. So you'll get something from us, you'll get something from them, and on the way down, and together we're creating a sort of fold of liberation through a multivocal or a polyvocal podcast collective. And that is, I think, the way the world should be leaning into, instead of platforming one human to be a talking head, to consume whatever one person is saying, when what we can get here is a collection of voices, and you can get wisdom on all different sides, and that is something that we need to see in the world, instead of perpetuating and accelerating the danger of a single narrative.
I think I'm the only non-originally American person. It is an experience where you talk about white American evangelical belief systems. So I grew up in Canada. My mom is British. I come from a pretty international family, and it's interesting how much this painful narrative has really spread, whether you know it or not. I mean, there really is a weird colonialism happening within where, all of this is being spread out even into communities like white, on white. It's just a very strange thing. And so for us to be able to look that thing in the face and be able to say, what would it look like if this wasn't the only voice? Because guys, it's a very, very, very short time in the history of Christianity. Us nerds up here can say it's so small, and yet it's been so harmful. It's been so painful. And until we talk about it, it's just this little tiny sliver of time as well as people, right? The population. Until we were able to do that, then people start to be able to normalize their own story and realize, hey, maybe this hasn't existed forever and maybe it won't continue to exist.
Yeah, because Lord knows I did not grow up in a white American evangelical church.
No, you
I
did
grew
not.
up in a Pentecostal Latin community. There was no Republicans in sight. It was lovely. And now that's not the case.
Yeah, and I don't want this to sound like a kumbaya moment, because there are, in any aspect of collaboration, there are questions around ethics and quality and money and all of the things that kind of come into play. But Robin and I have this conversation often, even about the spaces that we're in right now. I mean, even this space of progressive spirituality, where we are willing to talk about the hard things, where we claim to be people who are for each other in all ways at all times, we get out of this space and 361 days a year, we're eating our own. I mean, the competition, the way that we are jockeying for book deals and spots on people's podcasts and the visibility politics that come into play with people that you are in community with here in this space is as problematic as the division that we are seeing in our larger systems of politics and the corporate spiritual complex and our mega institutions. None of us are immune to that. And yet this collective gives us an opportunity to break that binary, to say there is nothing about any one of the voices that are a part of Irreverent Media that is better or less than. And that's a commitment that we make and have made when we have come into the fray of this community. I think it's important to name that, because none of us are immune to our egos. None of us are immune to our desire to push and achieve and figure out how we can one-up the person that in any other instance we might have sat beside on this stage any of the last 10 years.
There's a story I like to tell about my BFF Matthias Roberts and I. When we were first getting into this kind of work, being queer people on the internet. That is my work. What do you do for a living? I am a queer person on the internet.
Pays good money, right?
Oh, such good money. I have paid off all of my debt. No, I'm so broke. Please help me. I'm doing fine right now, but if you do have $50,000 lying around, I do have some credit card debt I need to get gone. So there's a donor out there, I believe, for me. Or a sugar daddy. Who knows? But Matthias Roberts and I, getting back to it, speaking of sugar daddies. And he's single, ladies. But anyways, Matthias Roberts and I were both blogging back when blogging was cool. And we, I was just fresh onto the scene, and I was trying to figure out how do I do this? And I learned, of course, how to be a good marketer and how to position myself to get more follows, to get more subscribers, to get more likes. And so that is what I equated with my worth. And then obviously, am I getting, is this person getting more views than me, more reach than me, blah, 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 blah. And then I got to a point where it's just I'm having a really hard time being friends with Matthias because I'm so fucking jealous of him because he's killing it. Everything he writes, people read and retweet. Everything he does is da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all the stories I was telling myself. And then one day I decided I'm just going to text him and just say, Matthias, I am jealous of you. I'm jealous of the things that you're doing. I'm jealous of people pay attention to you. And I don't like that. I don't want to do that anymore. And so I'm going to just be your cheerleader. So tell me how I can help you, if at all. And he said, "Oh my God, Kevin, I feel the same way." And that's how we became really good friends. And to this day, like, it's one of those things where when I look at the people on this stage, I feel very similarly. It's like, this is no longer a competition. You know, like, if I claim to try to be like anti-capitalist, like, I have to like dismantle it not only in how I'm doing business monetarily and in the economy, but within my own relationships as well.
Yeah. And I mean, that is one thing that I don't think a lot of podcasters talk about, is things like burnout or looking at other podcasters and measuring yourself against them. And comparison is the thief of joy, as people say. But like you're susceptible to it, and like there is a reality of what it costs to make the work, both monetarily and emotionally. And the hope is that by grouping together, that we as a larger group of podcasts can address that in various ways. And like this is still a very new effort. Like this is only a few months in, and we're still exploring how that will look. But we're all, to your point, Kevin. Like we want to assist one another. We don't want to compete with one another.
Can I say that even though we're only a few months in, Sarah, Heath, and we have become enablers of one another. So I feel like we've arrived just 2 months in.
We've done it.
Yeah.
We've done it.
So I think we're doing good.
They buy me drinks and I drink the drinks. Yeah.
Yes.
That's.
Oh my God.
Amen.
Sorry,
Amen.
Mom.
Mom, if you're listening, turn this off.
I think this group has been like a great example of what can happen if you choose to flip the script. If you choose that I don't want to be in competition, and people say I'm not going to make money that way, people say I'm not going to get listeners that way, and then all of a sudden you get into something like this and it's like, oh wait, they were wrong. They don't know what they're talking about.
Wrong.
Because
don't mishear. Like none of us are making money. None of us are getting rich off of our podcasts. However, this thing that we call the creator economy, and I think Kevin, you led us into this conversation really well. You know, there is the need. Those of us who are collaborators and those of us who are creators recognize the need to be in partnership with others. There's no way we can do our work together, whether you are an artist in any facet of the world, whether you are a marketer, whether you are writing, no matter what you're doing, there is an economy that has to undergird you in order for you to continue to facilitate your work. Now, that economy might be monetary, but it also might be an economy of community. It might be an economy of emotional or psychological support that encourages you or tells you the hard truth that it's actually time to get out. But our desire to kind of facilitate a creator economy through this collaboration, I think could be a good metric, or I hate that word, a good testing ground for other creator economies that are happening in spiritual spaces. Every church is a creator economy. Every community, every mom's group, every place that you are is a creator economy. You are doing new things. You are imagining the world as you want to see it. And there is an economy undergirding you in a multitude of ways. And so how can we flip the script and use that capacity for imagination and that capacity for possibility to really thwart the systems that try so hard to keep all of us down and keep all of us out of the conversation for the long term?
I think building out.
We promised you that Mason has a podcast.
Yeah.
We promised you
Yeah.
that he actually talks
We literally
on the
watched him.
interwebs. He does. He says things. He does. We just believe us.
Absolute fire tweets.
I was just told that I'm the straight white guy on stage, so I wasn't allowed to talk. So
we give you permission.
Wait, you're at
man.
Wild
Now you have
Goose. That's weird.
permission.
White guys not talking on stages? I mean, come on, it's true. And that's called shade.
You broke Blake. So just so you know, every meeting our goal is just to break Blake. So
Yeah,
we
every
just
time
did it.
during our meetings, yes.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Well, I
appreciate that.
kind of have a question, like maybe for the panel, and then we can go from there. But my question is like, when you imagine like what we're doing in 5 years, assuming that we all still like each other and are friends, and that we haven't died in some sort of crazy something that happens in the United States of America, not that I'm afraid of that. What do you want to see? Where do you want to? What do you think we could be doing in 5 years? Your wildest imaginations.
Mason.
Putting mates.
So the way I kind of think of it is, as we bring in more and more people to be a part of this collective, what I'm really excited for is to really truly shift the religious narratives in America, where when people think of the word religion or Christianity, they don't immediately think of conservative evangelicalism.
That's good.
Yes.
And so I'm really hopeful that regardless of where one is in their own faith at any given point, I'm really excited for people to really think about all the different ways that religion can really contribute to the world in really wonderful, liberative ways. And I hope that we're one small piece that is aiding and helping in that. And as we bring more and more people on board, I think we really have the potential to really shift those narratives. And so that's my hope, at least. I don't know about others.
I'm going to be boring, and I'm going to say I really want it to be very well organized. I'm a church admin, so I understand religiously affiliated disorganization.
She used to be my admin, if you're wondering.
No comment. I'm just kidding. I would love to build a system that is not only sustainable, but accepting, a place where maybe we'd have enough funds to like help other people get started. Mm-hmm. Podcasting is not expensive to start, which is a place of privilege to say that, because introductory microphones are $100 and not everybody has $100. But if we could, I would love to be able to say, hey, you have a great idea. Here's a microphone. At the very least, sustainability not only for ourselves and those involved, but for future generations of creatives.
Yeah. Yeah, I echo that completely. I think that's the sort of goal that I would like to get to, is that there are elements of things that the creator economy sometimes, what the tools that are available through Patreon, Substack, whatever, they scratch the same sort of itch of tithing, and they feel like a secular version of that. So you can we have to be sensitive to that and just acknowledge that that's the truth, but exploring ways in making this work sustainable, because of what Mason said too, of challenging that currently dominant narrative, and really exploring and giving a platform for people to be able to tell those stories. And I would love to be able to make that sustainable for those of us with shows, and then fund those new shows too. Like, both of those would be incredible dreams come true, to make that sort of dream a reality.
We'll probably pay more taxes in the church.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what Josie talked about, organization, because I think if we can get to a place where we are well organized, we will also be sustainable. And I think that in an environment where there is accelerated consumption, we often don't think about sustainability or the politics of sustainability. And so, one of the things that Anna and I are doing is, we have people who, on a monthly basis, give a little bit to the podcast, and that basically pays for our editing and for our hosting space with the Irreverent Media Group. What I would like to see is more people giving to our podcast, so that we can maybe distribute those funds, so that other voices can become a part of, other marginalized voices can be a part of the Irreverent Media Group, so that we can really practice what we say we are doing, which is a diversity of tactics toward collective liberation, which requires an attention, an orientation to sustainability.
So I would love to ask, we have about 7 minutes left. What's next for all of your podcasts? Like, what's on the docket? What's on the horizon? What's coming down the road? Like, what are the plans for the next couple of months? Like, how are you going to get these folks excited to actually subscribe and listen? Not that that's important. We love you all. We will love you whether you subscribe or listen or not.
If you don't subscribe to my podcast, you are transphobic.
We will love you whether you subscribe or not. And can someone please take Kevin's microphone?
Yeah. Has one beer.
Yeah. Hey, Kevin, what's next for you?
A Tiny Revolution. What's next? I'm trying to figure out whether or not I want to do like a special series within A Tiny Revolution. I'm really excited. I want to explore the question, what is healthy masculinity from every perspective? So I want to talk to cis men. I want to talk to trans men. I want to talk to non-binary folk. I want to talk to cis women, trans women, everybody. And then I want to talk about masculinity across cultures and through indigenous cultures. And what did we learn about masculinity that is keeping all of us fucked up? And how do we get free of it? That's what how do we heal? So that is my personal thing going on. And in my Patreon community, I just renamed it The Crowded Table. There's 188 people who are part of it, and we meet on Saturdays and do a little, witchy meditation sensation moment. So that's what's up for me, and I'm gonna popcorn. Blake, what's next for your podcast?
Okay, Exvangelical is just I'm working to try to move back to a weekly schedule instead of a twice monthly schedule. So hopefully I'll be able to do that in September or October. Additionally, I'm working on more writing, which I have a newsletter called the Post-Evangelical Post because all my ideas begin as dad jokes. So I'll be doing that some more. I am working on a book. And my other show, Powers and Principalities, the first season is complete. That season was on Christian nationalism from multiple angles, and the next one will be on Christian media. So that will be coming either in the winter or the spring. Mason.
Oh, hi. Well, the very next thing I need to do with my podcast is edit my episode with Brenda Davies, who I just interviewed. So I need to get onto that. For my podcast, I'll be kind of doing the same old. I release an episode every 2 weeks or so. And so I don't know if there's anything unique coming down the pipeline on that. However, I did recently in the last year start a YouTube channel where I do little 5-minute videos or so about different topics around theology and whatnot. So if you're into jokes about golden showers and Sufjan Stevens and talking about Jesus.
I don't think those two things in the same sentence.
You just heard it now. Then if that's your thing, then maybe my YouTube channel might be your thing, and you can look that up too. I would love to popcorn to Sarah.
Yeah, so I'm in the process of course, there's Your Favorite Aunts, which is the weekly fun, and we're starting to add other aunties. And so aunties is not it's not like a gendered term. So friends, family, anyone who wants to be one of the aunties that hops on, we would love to have you. And please let it be me.
Hell yeah,
absolutely. And then the other thing is for Making Spaces, I have been working for the last 2 months on revamping a 1973 Airstream that is turning into a podcast studio because I think we too much know about the stories of really crappy communities, and so I think there's so many amazing people who are making spaces out in this country and Canada, my home and native land, and so I think it would be really cool to go on the road and capture those stories. So I'm going to be making spaces in that way, and I have a YouTube channel that doesn't have all that content yet, but we're working on getting some videos up. You can watch me learn how to become Rosie the Riveter. So if you see me being super weird and looking at all the rivets on all the trailers, it's because I'm super into rivets right now, which is a weird thing.
Gentlemen, she's into rivets.
Riveting.
Yes. Yes.
Who do you pick next?
Josie.
My name is Josie. I have a podcast.
Hi, Josie.
Hi, Josie. Welcome.
I am an insane person in that I record and edit all of my own podcasts because I don't like to pay people to do things that I can learn to do on my own, and it bites my butt. So we're still doing weekly episodes of Speaking in Church. All of you should sign up for a time slot. if my goal is to have a conservative person come talk to me, I haven't had anybody yet. I think they're kind of scared of me. I'm a little aggressive, Enneagram 8, you know. So if anybody has an uncle who would love to come talk to a little Mexican girl about why Trump is amazing, please.
Who has
send
that
them
uncle?
my way. Every week I mention it, and nobody takes me up on it. But other than that, I'm excited to hopefully have some like in-person things once this COVID situation is under control in 5 years, and hopefully that'll include a lot of these folks.
We are so interesting story. Okay.
Okay, my dream is to become a Thea on the Your Favorite Ants.
It just happened. Dream came true.
So the Activist Theology podcast is a blend of Robin and I talking individually on episodes and kind of shooting the shit and really digging deeply into things that matter to us, and then bringing guests on and having conversations around the work that they're doing in the world in seeking collective liberation. I want to tell an interesting fun fact because it has actually changed a lot of our planning. In the spring, after the shooting in the spas in Atlanta, we decided to host a series of episodes on kind of supporting our Asian siblings and really kind of bringing on Asian voices that were important in the work and important in kind of the narrative that was important to us. We did a 6-week series on kind of highlighting these voices, and our ratings tanked. We lost probably 2/3 of our listeners over that 6 weeks. And it has provided some really curious space for us in navigating kind of what planning means for us and how we think we could or should move forward. And we are moving forward, but how we plan, how we build series, how we ask folks to come on and be in conversation. And so I share that story because I think it's an important way to also summarize some of the challenges that this kind of work presents for all of us. You don't know what's going to happen until you put the work into the world and the listens and the downloads and the data comes back and you get or you get a tweet or something interesting in your inbox that causes you to respond in a radical and sometimes violent way. And so we have guests coming up, and we have recordings that we're doing together. We're actually leaving in 10 minutes to go record an episode right now on the science behind the Enneagram, the actual brain and psychoanalytic.
Dr. Jerome?
With Dr. Jerome. With Dr. Jerome. And so, yeah, we've got stuff coming, and we're excited about it.
And once again, my dream is to become a Thea, and that's my dream.
What a small and achievable dream.
Yeah, you've got it.
I love it.
Done.
I want to thank everybody on this
And you guys
panel
for showing up to hear us
so
talk
much.
about our
Thank
youth.
Thank you for showing up. Thank you very much for listening.